And welcome back to the Clue Just podcast. We're host Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. Well, Michael, in the last podcast, we said we weren't sure if we're going to do another pod before Saturday's game. We touched on a lot of topics from the Giants game in that one, but we would do one if there was some news. And of course, there was some news. Corey Davis announcing yesterday walking away from football. Didn't use the word retirement, so we'll see about the future of his career. But nonetheless, doesn't seem like he's going to be playing football this year for the Jets, and it leaves them with a pretty big hole at receiver. The depth is a lot shakier. So we'll be talking about that. Do they need to bring somebody in? Who are some options? Should Joe Douglas use some of that cap space that Rodgers gave back and some of the cap space that Davis just freed to go for a big swing? Is that realistic? And then on top of that, I guess there's been a few more announcements for Saturday's game. Obviously, Dwayne Brown activated. He's been practicing this week. It doesn't seem like he's going to play Saturday. Becton officially getting the nod as the starting right tackle. And then the other one that sticks out to me, Alan Lazard, did get injured on Tuesday's practice, should be fine for the opener, but doesn't sound like he's going to play on Saturday. So that puts even more of a spotlight on that receiver position and who's going to fill Davis's shoes. So with that said, Michael, how are you doing and how did you react when you saw that tweet yesterday?
Well, I think obviously it was a shock to everyone whenever a player that young retires, especially someone who, seemed like he had a lot left to offer. And I thought he was going to play a big role for the team this year. So it was a shock, but at the same time, and you and I didn't really dive into it much, but it did feel like something weird was going on over the previous few weeks.
Right after we ended the last podcast, I texted you like a tweet about Corey Davis missing practice, and I was like, should we be talking about this more?
Yeah. So we didn't want to speculate too much, and we still don't because, first of all, you just hope that he's okay and doing all right. But it did seem like something was not right there in the sense that, it's more than just he's missing a few days. So it was shocking, obviously, but not completely surprising. And now it leaves the Jets in a very interesting spot at wide receiver, going not only into this game against the Giants, especially with Lazard probably missing this game, but also going into the regular season as well.
Yeah, I think shocking is the right word, but as you said, you don't want to speculate too much on what happened. And so now the Jets just have to turn the page. I mean, players get injured all the time. I mean, season starts in 2 weeks, right? Or I guess 2.5 weeks. There will be more players that will be out for the rest of the season starting in September, and the Jets are going to have to rebound. And receiver is one of those positions I think you felt good about the depth. Obviously, if Garrett Wilson were to go down, you were going to be worried about the unit, but you did feel like, okay, you've got Lazard, you got Davis, Hardman, Cobb. They can survive. Losing Davis, it makes a Garrett Wilson injury absolutely catastrophic, and it does put a lot of pressure on Joe Douglas to maybe go for a swing, make a move. I think a lot of the fan base is in favor of that. I will say, I do think, between the back end of the roster, they do have some guys that I think they're high on between Jason Brownlee, Xavier Gibson. Malik Taylor has been in this offense. Rodgers likes him. He was getting reps with the ones before he got hurt in camp. So I think any play special teams. So I do think he's a lock now. But we'll see what the Jets do. I mean, I'm questioning whether they make a move now or if they try to go into the season with the current crop of guys, see how the season unfolds, see if there are any other injuries, and then make a move before the deadline. Before we get into specific names and before we get into if they should make a move, let's just talk a little bit about Corey Davis and what you were kind of expecting and kind of the role that they're trying to fill with his absence.
Well, it was definitely up for debate where he was actually going to slide in terms of the pecking order of who's getting the most targets, second, third, fourth, and so on. Some people figured Lazard was going to be that second guy. Maybe Breece Hall or Conklin is up there as the real second target. And Corey wasn't super involved in the practices where he played, which was also an interesting thing, even outside of the fact that he wasn't at practice for a while. So it was kind of interesting to try to figure out where he was going to slide in. But for me, I thought he was the clear second best wide receiver on this team. You go back to that 2020 season in Tennessee, the only time that he's had competent quarterback play, or the last time at least, he was a very solid high-end wide receiver too, next to A.J. Brown. And I figured next to Garrett Wilson, he would be able to fill that role. And you compare him to a guy like Lazard, and I think Davis was more fit for that because Lazard in his career has been at his best in those first 3 years of the Packers when Devontae Adams was there and he was getting a pretty small diet of targets, only about 4 a game. And he was kind of in the background. He's competing with Valdez Scantling for that second receiver spot, but Aaron Jones was up there getting targets. So Lazard has never really been that solid wide receiver too, the way that Davis was in that Titan season. And then the last 2 years, Davis and Lazard were kind of putting up the same numbers with vastly different situations. So I thought Davis was the clear second best receiver, and I expected him to have a big season with Aaron Rodgers. So for me, it is a pretty big loss, and it definitely a big hit to the entire depth chart. So um, I know a lot of people have different opinions on that, but I think it's a pretty significant loss. Doesn't end, it's not the end of the world for this unit. I think as is, it can still be an excellent skill unit in the backbone of an elite offense, and we'll get into that. But it does lay a hit to the depth chart.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you and I completely see eye to eye on Lazard. I think I'm maybe a little bit higher on him than you are, and a lot of that just has to go with the familiarity he has in this offense and his chemistry with Rodgers. I kind of always felt like he was going to have a sizable share of this offense. But I do agree with you. I do think out of Lazard and Davis, I would take Davis. I think he was their second best receiver. But then, you look at Davis's situation. You mentioned how Lazard was competing with Valdez-Scantling, and that they had Aaron Jones catching targets. I mean, it's like Corey Davis was still in an offense with Derrick Henry destroying offenses and giving, heavy boxes and man-to-man coverage. And I know it's a different – I can just look in your face. I know it's a different situation, but I feel like, you're not giving Lazard enough credit that I do feel like he was at his best being Davante Adams' Robin. Why can't he do that in a very similar situation to be?
But he
Garrett
wasn't
Wilson's
though.
Robin?
That's the thing. He wasn't the Robin during those few years.
Okay, but he doesn't have to be in this one with Breece Hall and Tyler Conklin. And
I agree. But with Corey Davis out of the picture, now he is a little bit closer to being that than he would have been if Corey Davis were also there.
They have their 2021 offense. I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, even Randall Cobb, but it's like same offense coordinator, same QB. You just plug Garrett Wilson in for Davante Adams. You plug Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook in for Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. The Jets have better tight ends. Offensive line, we'll see. It's the same offense. I agree that the thing that's scary is if Wilson goes down, but I do think that their starting trio and is fine. And even Cobb as a receiver 4, like I know – how do you feel about Cobb as a receiver 4? I feel like, he has the chemistry with Rodgers. He knows the offense. He's the vet in the room. Could you do better at that spot? Maybe. Would you be more comfortable if Hardman is more of your gadget guy as a receiver 4? Yes. You probably still want another guy there. But Cobb can move the chains. Like he's getting a lot of run with this first team offense, and it's practice, but he's scoring points. He's doing his thing. I mean, I'm ready for year 11 of the Randall Cobb experience. I don't know about you.
I mean, I do like Cobb in that role. Him as the 4th receiver, I'm okay with, because that's what he was last year for the Packers, and he did okay. If you look at the way his film blew it, broke it down, but also his numbers, he was like a league average receiver in pretty much every category. And for your 4th receiver, a veteran slot guy who has a lot of familiarity and chemistry with the quarterback, I'm okay with that. It's, I just think Lazard and Hardman are now one spot higher than you'd ideally like them to be. But at the same time, I think, like you said, you look at the skill group now, and it's basically the Davante Adams Packers with Garrett Wilson subbing in for Davante Adams. So if you believe Garrett Wilson can match what Davante Adams did, which I believe he can, and I know a lot of Jets fans do, or even come close to that, not even necessarily match it, then I think you can be successful with this group, because the Packers laid out a map for how that can work. If you look at the distribution of how the Packers spread their targets around those three years where Hackett was there, Davante Adams was dominating it in a way that no other player in the league was doing it. He had twice as many targets as the second-ranked player in all 3 of those seasons, more than twice as many. He was getting 31% of all their passes in the games that he played. So like a third of the offense was him. And I think Garrett Wilson could do that same thing, because, the Jets don't really have that second guy in the way that the Dolphins have, or the Bengals, and some of these teams, the Jaguars, like some of these other AFC teams have that 1-2 punch. The Jets don't have that, but I think they have a one guy who can dominate in the way that Davante Adams did. So if Garrett Wilson can take that on, which I think he will, then Lazard can be in that role where he was with the Packers, where it's like, okay, technically he's the number 2 receiver, but he's still only getting like 4 or 5 targets a game, and he could stick to doing what he does best. You don't have to overfeed him, over rely on him beyond where he's played his best, which was, in those years of the Packers' limited role. And the same thing for Hardman, same thing for Cobb. When you have one guy at the top, like the way Davante was doing those 3 years, and I think Garrett can do, everyone slides into a better role. And then you throw in Brees Hall, you throw in Conklin. I think both those guys are going to be right up there. That's
Right.
probably the second and third targets, maybe even ahead of any of the receivers. So you combine all that, and I think it can work as long as Garrett is up to Devontae's caliber, which I am very confident he can do. So it can work.
It also makes a lot of sense, why they went after Dalvin Cook. Makes sense regardless. Brees Hall coming off the ACL, etc. Running back by committee. But it sounds like they kind of knew something was up with Davis for a while, and they were talking about it. And having another guy like Cook, I know you're not the biggest fan of Cook, but being able to flex Brees out.
Guy. What are you talking about?
What was our bet last time? How many yards does he have to have per carry at the bye? Was it 4.5?
What did I say? I think I said 4.5 yards per carry.
Don't let us
push that up a little bit, maybe 4.6.
No, 4.5. 4.5 at the bye.
4.5.
But I think that allows
them 2 fumbles and 1 touchdown.
No. 4.5 yards per carry.
All right.
It allows them to flex Brees out wide, and we know Brees' receiving chops, especially coming out of college. You only got to see it a little bit last year in limited action. We know Rodgers and Hackett love targeting the running backs. And then, like you said, you got Conklin, you got Uzama, you got Rucker. I think you're going to get a lot of 12 personnel and 22 personnel in this offense. And I think that's going to be the backbone of this offense. The question to me comes with the injury because, the whole thing with okay, is Lazard a high-end number 2, receiver number 2 in today's NFL? No, especially with if you have guys like T. Higgins and Jalen Waddle and, give me some other ones. There's some really high-end Christian Kirk. There's some really high. Thank you. Some really high-end receiver number 2s these days. So that's kind of skewed it a little bit, but I would still count Lazard as maybe a low-end receiver 2. Gets a little bit of a bump considering the chemistry he has with Rodgers and the offense and red zone threat. But I think Lazard is at his best playing out of the big slot. I think that's the role he thrives at the best, and he can dominate the red zone. And I also think that if he or Wilson were to go down, who are your outside receivers at 22 personnel? That's why I think this is going to be fascinating on Saturday, because it sounds like Garrett's going to play, but it doesn't sound like Lazard's going to play. So who are you starting outside, an 11 or 22 or 12 or whatever? Who's playing outside? Is it Mecole Hardman? Are you going to – I mean, he's gotten some outside reps in Kansas City, but I think he's definitely best in the slot. And like you said, that seems like a stretch of what you would want Mecole doing. Are they going to put Malik Taylor out there, who was getting reps with the first team, is probably the best run blocker out of the remaining receivers, behind Lazard and probably just Lazard. Where would you rank Malik Taylor? Do we know enough about Malik Taylor's run blocking to put a grade on it yet?
I wouldn't say so. You and I were trying to watch some plays before this. There's nothing really notable in the preseason, so we never saw him mess up. You could say that. But he was getting
first team.
That much,
He's tall and he wears a number in the mid 80s, so I think that makes him good.
Yeah, he's a
good run blocker. We'll see about Taylor. I do hope he plays this Saturday. Sabo was telling us 3 weeks ago that he's getting reps with the ones and 12 personnel. So I think the Jets think that he's an okay run blocker. He plays on special teams, so I think that's probably part of the reason I think he's an okay blocker. But we don't want to talk out of our ass here. So regardless, who's playing on the outside? If an injury happens, or if you want to put Lazard in the slot, is Lazard pigeonholed into playing in the slot or playing outside now? That's kind of where the complication comes for me. It's not as much my doubt in Lazard and Hardman as much as you kind of forces them into specific roles. They lose some versatility, and if one big injury happens outside, they're really put in a tough position.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest concern. I'm more concerned about what's going to happen if Garrett Wilson gets hurt than I am about how the unit is going to function right now. Because, with Corey Davis, if Garrett Wilson gets hurt, you still have Davis and Lazard as your starting outside guys, Hardman and Cobb in the slot. It's still a nice unit. Obviously, your number 1 is worse than most teams, probably being Corey Davis, but in terms of the depth, it's still there. So now without him, though, you lose Garrett Wilson, and it's just last year's Packers team, basically. Lazard at the top, some unproven young guys at the bottom of the depth chart. You have an athlete in Mecole Hardman and Christian Watson, and Watson came on at the end of last year, so maybe he's even ahead of Hardman. And then you have Randall Cobb, who was also there last year. So pretty similar to the unit that the Packers had last year that we blame for Aaron Rodgers' struggles if Garrett Wilson goes down.
Not the whole, the thumb injury has something to do with it too.
That did have partially to do with it. But I think a lot of people point to the weapons. At least, I do a little bit, but probably more thumb. A mix of different things, but that was part of it. So it's more so how you rebound after Garrett Wilson gets hurt. That's why I would like to see And we'll talk about some of the
All
options
right, let's
that
get
they
into
could go
it.
after. But that's why I would like to see them potentially pursue someone else. So if Garrett Wilson goes down, you could still survive off of that.
Let's get into some of those options because I think immediately, and people have been talking about this. I think we even talked about it briefly on the podcast. Devontae Adams, that's the dream. Best friends with Rodgers. His guy Derek Carr isn't even there anymore. Could that trade happen? Doesn't. We'll see how he gels with Josh McDaniels, what the Raiders' future is with Jimmy Garoppolo. They're kind of on the cusp of a team that's trying to compete, but then could also try to enter the Caleb Williams sweepstakes. So who knows what his future holds. But then you look at that contract and the dead cap that the Raiders would have to take on to even trade him, let alone the money that the Jets would have to take on to trade for him, let alone the draft capital the Jets don't really have to get a player like Devontae Adams. That seems like a pipe dream to me. Would you agree? We made some tiers here. Let's talk about the 2 tier 1 guys we have, Devontae Adams and Mike Evans. We're not playing Madden here, folks. And as fun as it sounds, and I'm holding out maybe some hope. I just don't see this happening. If it happens, I don't think it would happen until the trade deadline, and I would still put that as like less than 5%. And the Raiders have to be really bad, and the Jets would really have to be, in a situation where they're pushing all their chips in and working out something with the contract.
Right. Yeah. These 2 guys feel like a pipe dream, and it would be nice, but between the contracts and also the Jets not having their first or second round pick to trade next year because they have to keep both of them available until the conditions of that trade are official. They can't trade a first or second until 25. They really can't trade for this type of guy, I don't think. And the Bucs GM has said that they want to keep Evans, which doesn't necessarily mean anything. We know that as well as anyone. But it is worth noting. He said that pretty recently, I think last week.
Do you think it was odd timing that the Jets Twitter tweeted out that clip of Mike Evans and Quinn Williams?
It was interesting. And Sauce also had a cryptic tweet, which probably means absolutely nothing. He just likes riling people up. But nonetheless, maybe something's cooking. But I mean, he was in tune on the Rodgers pursuit in hindsight. So I don't know. Probably means nothing. But yeah, I think both of these superstar guys probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I think Evans is the more realistic out of the 2 of them. Obviously Adams has the familiarity with Rodgers, but Evans is the lower cap hit for both the Jets, and it's the lower dead cap for the Bucs. The Bucs would have to be $21 million in dead cap, which isn't nothing, but he is a free agent after this year. I'm sure they can work out. They already do have some void years in there to help kind of spread out that cap. And the Jets would take on $13 million. But if the Raiders were going to trade Devontae Adams, they'd have to eat $54 million in dead cap, and I just don't really see that deal getting spread out and being able to maneuver around that, considering they just signed him to a deal last year. The biggest roadblock with Adams, I think, is the draft capital. With Evans, because he's going to be a free agent after this year, if the Bucs are at the trade deadline, they don't look too good. Bowles is on the hot seat. They're getting ready for the Caleb Williams show. I could see them shipping Mike Evans out for less than market value and working something out with that contract. So if they're going to go for a big fish, I think it's Mike Evans at the trade deadline. I don't think it happens now. I think Adams, I hate to say it, I just think Adams is a pipe dream. Evans would bring you a lot of that outside versatility, that run blocking, that size. And obviously, I'd love to see him in this offense, but if you're talking about moves you can make right now and even moves at the trade deadline that might even be more realistic, because who knows what Mike Evans wants to do. Maybe he wants to stay in Tampa the rest of his career. Maybe the Bucs don't want to trade him. Maybe the Bucs are doing well, or at least kind of competing in the NFC South, which isn't the strongest division, and want to keep him around. There's a tier 2 of guys that you've had one in particular you've been very high on. I have to say, I think you were the first guy to really float him out there. Jets Twitter seems to have taken this name and run with it. I do think he makes the most amount of sense. And if they're going to go for a trade right now, I think it's going to be somebody in this tier. And I'll give it to you first. But Hunter Renfrow, how do we feel about it?
Yeah, I'm all aboard this Hunter Renfrow idea. I kind of stumbled upon it yesterday, looking through some of the receivers who could potentially be traded. And there's a lot of reasons to think, A, that he could be traded, and B, that he would make sense for the Jets. So why could he be traded? The Raiders last season hired Josh McDaniels. Renfrow had a huge production decline in his first season, and obviously they added Adams, and that contributed to that. But just his efficiency and his fit in the offense was much worse than the rest of his career. And he did battle some injuries, but even before the injuries, he was way down in terms of efficiency compared to the rest of his career. Then after the season, they go out, they sign Jacoby Myers, $33 million deal. They also signed two other veteran receivers to 1-year deals, Philip Dorsett and DeAndre Carter. And then they draft a receiver in the 3rd round. So they made a ton of receiver moves after he has a down year with the new coach. So there's a lot of reason to think that they could trade him. They can clear some cap space if they do deal him. I believe $7 million they would clear if they trade him. And they have some of the least caps. I think the fourth or fifth fewest cap space in the league right now. So they need cap space. They can clear cap space by getting him. Wasn't fit in the offense. They added a ton of new receivers. There's a lot of reasons to believe that he could be traded. So why would he make sense for the Jets? I think if you get him, he's immediately your second best receiver, pretty clearly. I mean, I feel like a lot of people forget how good he was in 2021. He had over 100 catches, 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, and that was on a playoff Raiders team that was 6th in passing yards. So he's a number 1 guy and a really good passing attack for a playoff team. That's easily a better season than anything I think Lazard or Hardman has ever had. And, Cobb is older, so it doesn't matter. So yeah, I think he easily slides in as the second receiver, and he gives them the fit is a little bit interesting because I think, like you said earlier, I agree that Lazard is at his best as a big slot receiver. But, Renfrow isn't really a pure slot guy. He can play outside pretty frequently. And that in the 2021 season, it was like 1/3 of his reps were outside versus 2/3 in the slot. So he does play plenty of out wide, and he's actually more efficient when he is out there. So you're not getting like a pure slot guy. And now, Lazard has to be outside all the time. Renfrow can move around, so you can still move all these chess pieces around the offense. So I think you're getting a guy who gives you much better depth if Garrett Wilson goes down. I think he fits well in this offense because I think you want another guy next to Wilson who you can rely on between the 20s, just methodical catches to move you down the field, like 3rd down conversions or 1st and 10, just hitting quick slants to put you ahead of the chains. So I think he gives you a lot of that versus, Lazard's more of a big play threat. In the red zone, I think he's good. I think he can hit some deep shots pretty efficiently. If you pick your spots correctly with him, you don't overstuff him with the deep shots. I think that's what Lazard does. He's more of a big play threat versus you get a guy like Renfrow. I think now you have a number 2 next to Wilson who Rodgers can rely on to win his route against the favorable matchups he gets because of Wilson, to win on 3rd down, to have solid hands and not drop a lot of passes because, Lazard's hands are pretty shaky. That's something that I don't think enough fans realize with him, is that he's pretty drop prone. If you thought Corey Davis had some drop issues, Lazard's going to frustrate you. So I think a guy like Renfrow gives you that reliable number 2, improves the depth. Everyone's back in a position that makes sense for them. Lazard's in that 3, Hardman's in that 4. Cobb goes down to 5, which, for his age, may be better for him. So I like the idea of a Hunter Renfrow trade. We'll see if it's actually realistic, if the Raiders really want to trade him, but there are a lot of signs that suggest they do.
Yeah, and I think that a receiver, you feel a lot better about a receiver trio of Wilson, Renfrow, Lazard. Going past the trio, Lazard, Cobb. You feel good about that unit, like you said. It improves the depth. It improves the depth, and it gives you a little bit more versatility. An ability to put Lazard in that big slot role, ability to move these guys around, not having to feel so pigeonholed into sticking too much 12 personnel and 22 personnel, and it just gives them the ability to survive an injury. And also his contract is pretty team friendly. I'm going to pull it up real quick, but there's an out after this year. And
I was going to mention that base salary is 6.5 this year, 11.2 next year. He's got 2 years left, so pretty affordable for the team picking him up.
What do you think Renfrow would cost in the trade? I do think out of any of them, he's the one that they could do within the next week.
I would say 3rd or 4th, somewhere in there, and I'd be willing to do the 3rd. If that were the price, would you be on board for that, or a little high?
I mean, I don't think that's your first offer, but if a 3rd gets it done, you're in a win now.
He's a good player. We were looking at his routes yesterday. He's a very, very slick route. In pure route running, he's one of the best guys in the league. He might be the least athletic receiver, but route running and hands, he's way up there.
How does that make any sense? You can't be the least athletic receiver but be a good route
It,
runner, you know?
I think
Just
you
a
can.
technician.
It's yeah, he's just got the technique down. Like you look at, it's not really explosive how he makes those cuts or anything. He's just so good at setting
Very
up his
fluid.
routes. He's deceptive. He just knows how to execute them.
Yeah, he's gritty,
Yeah,
team
just I'm
player.
not even gonna say he's deceptively athletic because he's
Yeah.
not.
um, yeah, I guess if he now here's another idea that could go for any of these receivers. If the Jets feel like they want to hold on to their draft capital, do you trade one of these edge rushers? If the Raiders are
That's an
interested in
interesting
Bryce
one.
Huff,
Carl Lawson. I mean, he's becoming an interesting name to watch
I
with
think that
the
Lawson
status
back
of
in.
his
I think
injury.
I think Lawson's going to the pup list. That's my bold prediction. I mean, it's not that bold, but once I saw that video of him running, which I think came out last week, that back looks hurt and he looks very stiff. He's tweeting out every single day, limitless, which maybe I'm reading too much into this, but it kind of seems like one of those things where he's really going through a bad injury and he's motivating himself. He's telling himself he's limitless,
That's
but
one hell of a conspiracy
why
theory
would
right
he's
there.
tweeting it he's tweeted out like
He
20
was doing it
times.
before he was out. I showed it to you.
Oh, I
It
didn't
was
see
the
that.
1st of August the first time he did that. Well, maybe he
Okay,
did
well,
it
he's
once.
tweeting out limitless, but
He had a
he's
back injury. He's like, I
clearly
need to keep doing
limited.
this.
So anytime a player starts talking about how they're unlimited, the trend is not too good for Carl Lawson. Well, I mean, we'll see. I just think that he's probably starting the year on the pup list. We'll see, maybe not, but at the very least, I think he's probably lost the starting spot to Jermaine Johnson. I like Carl Lawson. I was hoping he was in store for a big year. He was so damn good in that preseason of 2021, and then tore the Achilles last year. I thought he was still compiled plenty of pressures, but takes 2 years to come back from that injury. So it's a bummer to see him deal with this back. I hope it's not. I hope it's just a mild back strain, and that by the time the season rolls around, he's doing a lot better and he's able to give it a go. But he is a guy that I would rather trade Carl Lawson than Bryce Huff for sure. But I think Huff might be the more realistic trade candidate because he's so cheap and he's younger and he's such a damn good pass rusher. Would you trade they say Bryce Huff for Hunter Renfrow straight up? Let's see. Do you put your money where your mouth is? Are you doing it?
That's a tough one. That would test me. This is why I'm not a GM. Ooh, that's a hard one. What do you think? 2 seconds. Got to answer it now.
No, I think I'd try to find another deal. I think between Carl Lawson, between the picks,
I tend to agree, but then I think bona fide number 2 receiver versus edge rusher who plays like 15% of the snaps.
And you have Will McDonald.
But I love Bryce Huff so much. I'm going to say no. I'm sticking with our guy.
I just think that the backbone of this entire team is the ability to rush the passer, and you have one of the best pass rushers.
Especially with Lawson's uncertainty now, I would use that depth.
And you have one of the best pass rushers.
Versus trading it.
One of the best pass rushers of the league, and I think we've kind of not. Oh, by the way, friend of the pod. Can't forget that Bryce Huff. We were on it before everybody else. You don't want to. We've been kind of chalking him up as a guy who's not going to be back next year, just because they have so many guys they have to pay, and he'll be a free agent. But I think that Lawson will be off the books. I feel like there's a way for him to come back. I know that it seems like they just drafted Jermaine. They just drafted Will McDonald. There's no room for him. But in his role, he's the best in the league. If he's looking for a more expanded role, he goes elsewhere. If maybe there's a team that throws stupid money at him, in which case maybe it is smart to trade him. But it's a win now year. You're going for the Super Bowl. Bryce Huff in a playoff game can send you to the next round by himself. And we saw him literally win a game for them against Buffalo last year. He can do that in those fourth quarter situations. Bryce Huff's a guy who went out there, so I think he's too valuable for me. I would be hopeful that you could. I really do want Renfrow. I agree with you. I think he's the right call for this team. But I would hope that I would start with the 4th round pick. Try to work with the picks. If they force you to give up a third, Rodgers gave you back $35 million, so put it to use and go get Renfrow. And I feel good about that receiver unit too. Compared to all these the rest of the guys we're going to get into, we reach a point in these tiers where it's like, all right, maybe we just roll with, see what Jason Brownlee turns into, or see if Malik Taylor can, put up a solid season, or just hope for no, you know what I mean? Like at a certain point with these tiers, how much of an upgrade is it really over Mecole Hardman and Randall Cobb? Yeah. Hunter Renfrow is a legitimate upgrade, and you feel good about that unit. The other guy in tier 2, and the only other guy in tier 2, And I don't think we would have put him on here if it didn't seem like the Cardinals were having a fire sale. But Hollywood Brown, I don't know how realistic this is. They did just trade a first rounder for him last year. He's boys with Kyler Murray, but perhaps the Cardinals are already eyeing Caleb Williams, so maybe they don't care about Kyler Murray's loyalties. But they've traded Isaiah Simmons and Josh Jones back to back. Brown's in a different category. I don't see this happening. I think this is unrealistic, but we threw him in there because why not? What do you make of Hollywood?
Not as much evidence pointing to him versus Renfrow, but the Cardinals already made 2 trades today with decently valuable players, Isaiah Simmons and Josh Jones. Solid young players, part of their rotation. I mean, Jones was going to be a backup, but potential starter on some teams in the league. So yeah, if they are full fire sale, maybe he's available, but probably not. But he was worth putting on here if they can.
He is a free agent next year. That is the only thing. He is a free agent next year, and they can trade him for, I'm still kind of confused on how this cap hit dead cap works. Would the Jets take on the entire – they would take on the entire base salary, right? So they can free up –
right.
Yeah, so they can get rid of him completely if they want. It's just, do the Jets have the draft capital that they'd want for a player like Hollywood Brown? I think there are other teams that might be able to offer you a day 2 pick.
Right. And I think he would be worthwhile if you can get him. I mean, different type of player than Renfrow. I mean, they're both undersized, but Brown is really more of an outside receiver and more of a speed, explosive threat. So completely different types of players. But at the end of the day, I think we go back to what is our main question after losing Corey Davis. It's not even necessarily how the unit looks today. Can it go win a game? It's how are they going to win a game if Garrett Wilson goes
in November?
So right. Towards the end of the year, injuries pile up. It's the depth of the unit. So I don't really care what type of receiver it is. I just think getting another guy in there who's, better than Lazard, I would say, it would be very valuable if they could get that done.
All right. These next 2 tiers are the last that they could potentially trade for. Definitely a step down. But like you said, we're worried about the depth. Tier 3. Actually, this tier is still pretty solid. Again, 2 guys I don't necessarily see getting traded. One more likely than the other, though. Michael Gallup. I do think it's possible that the Cowboys could move him for the right price. What do you think of Gallup? The other one is Rashad Bateman. Don't see him as likely, but he has been surpassed on the depth chart by Zay Flowers, OBJ. I don't know. I threw him on here. So what do you think about Gallup and Bateman as our tier 3 receivers that they could trade for?
Yeah, this is probably the last tier among the ones we listed where I'm like, okay, if you can get that guy, go ahead, get him in here, because Gallup and Bateman, I think, give you some upside. And Gallup at this point, it feels like every year they talk about trading him. And it's been a while at this point since he was that budding star, but he's probably a solid player who's on a similar caliber of Lazard, I would say. So if you can get him, I think that improves your depth. Bateman, is plenty of upside, but he's battled some injuries in Baltimore. It's not the greatest place for a receiver to put up numbers. So I think there's some potential with him as well. So either of those guys I would be interested in if they were available, but we don't really know, as always. So, but yeah, I think beyond this, though, and I mean, we'll mention some.
I'll listen.
I don't even know how deep we want to go in, because
we don't
this
have to
is just Jag City at this point.
All right, hold on. Well, tier 4 still has some guys in here that I think. My thing is, I don't want them to trade for somebody we didn't talk about. So here's some other guys: Zach Pascal, Cardinals receiver, good run blocker, but probably a Jag. Cedric Wilson from Miami. I don't necessarily see Miami trading him in the division, but he's Miami's 3rd receiver. They've been shopping around all offseason, so I could see it. Darius Slayton. Giants have a lot of receivers, a lot of slot receivers. I could see him being moved. They play him on Saturday, so maybe there's a move for one of those receivers. Traquan Smith. Some fans have floated around from New Orleans. Hasn't done too much, but he is a name. And then Curtis Samuel, who a lot of Jets fans wanted the Jets to sign.
He does have a name. We can give him that.
He does have a name.
He plays football.
He does play football. I don't know much about him outside of I signed into my fantasy team and he did nothing. So out of those guys, anybody catch your eye? These are the last guys that I could see them trading for.
I mean, I like Slayton. I feel like he shows up whenever I watch Giants games.
Okay, that analysis.
He definitely has a helmet on.
Okay. All right. The tier 5 guys, we had Greg Ward from Philadelphia and Josh Reynolds, 2 guys that I could see getting cut. And then tier 6, the Keelan Cole reunion Marquise Goodwin,
All
solid
right,
guy.
it's over.
Jarvis
It's over.
Landry,
I'm gonna cut you off right there.
veteran presence. Julio Jones.
You've had enough tonight.
Take him out of the retirement home. So I don't know. Out of all those, the most likely, probably the best fit, and the one I could see him doing right now is Hunter Renfrow. Evans maybe at the trade deadline. And then outside of that, we'll call on Michael Gallup, call on Hollywood Brown, call on Rashad Bateman. But after that, it's Jag City. If they can't get anybody, there is a question of, do you just roll with the current unit? And I don't know how you feel about Malik Taylor and Jason Brownlee, but we'll certainly get a chance to watch at least Brownlee this week, and we'll see if Taylor plays. And also Xavier Gibson. He's kind of getting lost in the shuffle a little bit because he's another slot guy, another return guy. You kind of feel like the Jets need to get somebody on the outside. I think Gibson's like 5'9". But between him, Irvin Charles, there's definitely a roster spot. At the very least, they're going to keep 5 receivers. So one of Taylor, Gibson, Charles, Brownlee is going to make it. And I'd say at this point, probably 2. I think my prediction is that they'll cut Malik Taylor at the deadline, put Carter Warren, JBC, maybe Carl Lawson, whoever else on PUP, bring Taylor back because he's not one of those guys that I see getting claimed. But I think there's another spot there for a young guy. So who do you like the most? Brownlee, Gibson, Charles, and what do you want to see from them this Saturday?
Well, I think it depends on what the Jets want and the guys that they're keeping. If they want to keep someone who they can trust to play on special teams, this guy can help us right now, playing different special teams roles. I think Taylor is your guy because he's plenty of special teams experience in the regular season. He played with the Packers a couple years, 25 games actually, over 300 special team snaps, made some tackles. So he's proven on special teams that he's solid and he can help you in that area. But just offensively, I don't really know what he brings. I know he's the new Jeff Smith. I mean, Jeff Smith in that Lions game was almost kind of carrying us to the playoffs, but that's the only memory I have.
What's Jeff up to
him on offense?
What is maybe they give Jeff these days? Maybe they give Jeff a call.
Check out the old Pro Football
Denzel Mims.
See what's up. I don't know. It looks like he's in a Giants jersey in this picture. I think he's on the Giants. Oh yeah, he's on the Giants. So
there we go. Get a chance to see our old friend on Saturday.
But I just don't know what Taylor brings on offense because he had the one catch, but hasn't done anything really outside of that. And when he's in Green Bay, he didn't do a lot on offense. So good special teams player. I just don't know about the receiver.
He had some nice routes in that Panthers game. We were watching. Come on now. Don't want to discredit him too much.
He had one catch on a screen.
Okay, but then he had some
Brownlee,
nice routes,
I think you're thinking of.
No. Taylor in the Panthers game. We were watching it. He had some nice. He had the one drop over the middle, but he had some nice routes. No.
Not that I remember. Maybe I was at that game, so maybe I didn't. Maybe I missed it. I don't know. But
I guess right. Brownlee had a nice game against the Bucs.
He did have a good game against the Bucs, but it wasn't an amazing game in the first 2 games. He mostly struggled, I would say. So you're just not totally sold on him yet, but you see flashes of quickness,
one-handed catch
out of his breaks, the one-handed catch in practice one time. But I mean, Baldy, beyond the one-handed catch, like they gave him a very big guarantee, one of the highest in the league, and they have been chatting him up really since the OTAs and minicamp and all that. So
and he goes.
I think there's legitimate. Which is always a win if you do that. If you
good track.
You never want to listen to my opinion. So
you got Brown hire doing that for me,
right, exactly. Which he said. People think they know everything these days. I don't know anything, so I don't know.
Well, to be fair, there was a typo in there. The people should know. There's the second half of that sentence. You said maybe you don't want Hardman as your receiver 4 when you meant to just say that about Cobb.
Right.
At least that was your explanation to me.
I wish I
think that's what he's reacting
verified
to.
Subscription gave me more time to edit because I legitimately did mess it up. I meant that he's okay as the 4. I don't want him as the 3, but I think I said something different. So
you said,
but it's okay. I get it. So, but what were we talking about? Brownlee.
Talking about Brownlee, and then you were talking about the young guys, Charles, Gibson.
Well, I think you can see the legitimate upside with Brownlee. Like he looks the part. You and I were just watching his Bucs targets, and he had a tough contested catch over the middle, sharp out of his breaks. I think he shows you yak potential. In terms of, he's had definitely at least 2 broken tackles after the catch this preseason. They were pretty nice. So you can see the potential, but still some work to do to
It's
prove it,
gonna
obviously.
sound ridiculous, but he's the only guy that if Wilson were to go down, that I think can even kind of come close to trying to replicate him. Not that he can, but like if we
Right.
were facing
I see
Garrett
what you mean,
Wilson,
like skill
if
set
you
wise. Like
if we were
Alan
facing
Lazard's
Garrett,
not doing any of that.
if we were facing Garrett Wilson, he's the scout team Garrett Wilson. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I get what you mean.
So you're hoping that he can develop throughout the season, but it's a lot to put on an undrafted rookie who you ideally were thinking would probably just be on the practice squad and in a Super Bowl year. But Rodgers has had a history of developing some young receivers. Obviously, you saw it last year. That is part of the benefit of bringing in a Hall of Fame quarterback, is you think that he can raise the level of the guys around him. We saw Brady do it. We saw Manning do it. The great quarterbacks can do it, so they can survive an injury. And so maybe Brownlee, sticks on the team, develops. If an injury happens, second half of the season, he's able to produce. I wouldn't count it out. He clearly has the talent, and the Jets like him. But yeah, I'd feel a lot better about this unit if they went out and traded for a guy like Renfro. My current 6-man receiver depth chart is, we know the top 4, and I would say Malik Taylor and Jason Brownlee. I think they try to stash Gibson on the practice squad. I like his return ability. Did muff a few punts in practice and in the game. But I think he's a quick guy that they'd like to develop. They can stash Irvin Charles there as well. But I think Brownlee makes the roster, and I don't even think they cut him. I think they'll cut Taylor and bring him back, because I think they're not worried about anybody claiming Malik Taylor. Maybe somebody would claim Brownlee. The only other guy we didn't talk about, Alex Erickson. Any thoughts on him?
Well, I mentioned to you earlier before we started recording, maybe he's a wild card just because, he's a veteran and he has, he's been a 53-man roster player for most of his career. So, like, if you don't view the undrafted free agents as ready to contribute, if you don't like Taylor, what he brings to the offense, then Erickson has at least been like a bottom of the roster receiver in the league, and he has punt return experience and has been pretty solid at that. So I would say he's a wild card if they really don't like the other players, but I don't think that's the case. It seems like they do. They are pretty high on some of those guys.
And then, the other thing is there will be cut downs. There are plenty of receivers that other teams' fan bases are hoping that they can stash on their practice squad. So, JD is going to be active on the waiver wire. So we'll see. We'll see how active he is. We'll have another podcast before then, but ultimately it's the receiver show this Saturday. I mean, Rodgers starting and the dress rehearsal is definitely the most important storyline. In fact, let's get into some random predictions, then we get out of here. That's definitely the most important storyline and the number one thing I'm excited for. But as soon as Rodgers goes out, pay attention to the receivers. Who's, a big performance here can really solidify somebody's roster spot, in my opinion. I'm also curious to see who starts opposite Garrett Wilson on the outside. I'm sure they're going to give Mecole Hardman some reps there, but who's the next guy up? It seems to me like it'll be Jason Brownlee who'll get that first crack. So we'll see if see what happens. Let's hear some random predictions before we get out of here. Okay, I want 3 random predictions from you. Okay,
I got one right off the top of my head.
Hit me.
Opening drive, and this also kind of answers the question you just proposed. I'm going to say opening drive, Aaron Rodgers touchdown, corner route, back right pylon, Malik Taylor. That just sounds like such a preseason.
We don't know Malik Taylor's playing. It's a bold random prediction.
We don't know. Oh yeah, he didn't play in the Bucs game, right?
Yeah, he's still injured, so we don't know.
Oh, okay.
The B reporters have not given us an update on his injury, but Rich Amini even forgot he existed.
Garrett Wilson. I'm changing it to Garrett Wilson.
That's probably the safer pick. I'll go.
Much safer. But as specific
leads,
as I made it, it could give me some points if they match that.
Rodgers leads opening drive touchdown, Tyler Conklin.
Okay, what's the route?
I have to predict the route here? I don't know.
You got to give something. I mean, maybe go off that Panthers game with all those bootlegs.
Something over the middle.
Something over the middle.
I guess that's right. He's been sending the tight ends to the flat. I see something kind of over the middle. I don't know why. Something down the seams, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right, so that's one.
Fairly long.
We're each predicting
20 yards.
We're each predicting an opening drive touchdown. I like that. Now, do you think they pull him if they do that, or do you think they give him another rep? Because Saleh said they kind of want to have the
touchdown. I think they would.
But Saleh did say he wanted them to have the drive, come back, regroup, and go back out there. So, but if you have the
that makes me think they might go back out. But if you score a touchdown, can you really do that? Like, that's hard to
Yeah.
justify.
All right, I got second prediction. Ready for this one? This is a bold one. Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson both get sacks.
Okay. Well, I mean, didn't that just happen 2 games ago? Well, I mean, it would be bold for it to happen
All
again.
right, yeah. Sorry, I was kind of half joking when I said bold, but we've been predicting one for Will McDonald, and I'm going both of them are getting sacks. I guess it's not that bold, but how do you feel about that?
I think it has a good chance of happening. I mean, does McDonald have one in every game, or Huff has one in every game? McDonald the last 2, or the first 2 he had one. Either way, a lot of sacks to go around. But I'll go with the defensive prediction. I'm gonna say Sauce tackles someone.
What the fuck was that? No,
I was gonna say he's gonna get an interception, but if I'm saying that on top of an opening drive touchdown, it's just too much.
Sauce.
I don't have a defensive one.
I have 2 that I'm going back and forth between. Okay, but only one is realistic. So, only one.
This isn't exciting, but it's very specific. So if it happens, I deserve credit. Mosley will have a pass deflection on the first drive.
So just the exact same thing from 2 years ago when he had the pass deflection against the Giants on the first drive.
He did? I don't remember that.
Remember Zach's debut?
Oh,
first play of the game.
That?
I don't know. I remember weird plays. I'm like Sean McVay. First play of the 2021 preseason game against the Giants, he batted the ball. It was like, I think I remember because it was Mosley's first play in a while. You don't remember that?
There we go. There's precedent for it. So I'm saying
you definitely tweeted that clip out. I'm between a Tony Adams interception and a Michael Clemens forced fumble. How do we feel about this? You had some slander
for
a
sack fumble or a like.
No, I'm feeling more like a running back and him just kind of. I don't know. I'm stuck between them.
That's fair.
You had some Clemens slander this week.
I like the Clemens one. It's not slander if it's rooted in fact. Let's say. I don't think he's been great at defensive tackle so far. It's, when he's been on the edge, I feel like you've seen the same guy, but inside.
All right, fine. Clemens forced fumble.
Struggling to transition a little bit. So there we go.
I'm going Clemens forced fumble.
All right.
Do you have any other ones?
Special teams prediction? I'm going to say
Morstead punts.
I was going to say Gibson touchdown.
Jesus.
What do you think of that
greatest game ever?
Sprinting segment.
Makes sense.
On Hard
I wish we'd asked
kind of low on content if they're featuring that.
That was kind of funny. No, I like those little quirky. Those are funny. More so than like training camp highlight videos. Those are the things I love to see in Hard Knocks. Just the little like quirky things about the team behind the scenes.
I agree. I was going to criticize and say like, "Oh wow, this is what you're showing." But I was like, you know what?
That's our guy Morse. That's our guy Morse. The only other reoccurring Jets player guest on this podcast. How dare you? It made sense.
It's a recurring character in this podcast.
He's going to come back on, so we'll ask him about it. All right. Anything else? Final score?
I'm gonna say Giants 23, Jets 15.
I'll go Jets 63, Giants nothing. You like that?
Nice.
I'm just kidding. I don't know.
It'll probably be preseason record, right?
Yeah, probably. I think the Jets will win this. Giants are a good team, but Jets are playing the starters. Giants aren't. So Rodgers' debut. All right, that's it. Last thing, we had to mention him. Zach Wilson. Anything you want to see from him in particular? More of the same, or are you trying to see one more big highlight from him? Maybe a touchdown drive?
I would like to see. I'm going to say I would like to see him let loose a little bit. This is going to be his last, hopefully last time on the field for a while. So, I feel like so far he's done a nice job of building confidence and consistency. He's worked within the offense. Didn't want to check the ball down, getting the ball out quick, and that's how the coaches have called it too. Granted, it's preseason, backup O-lines and receivers. You don't want to take too many chances and risk injury, but it's the last preseason game, last chance to end off on the right note before the regular season starts. I would love to see him take some chances in this one.
All right.
And, whether it's a scrambling play, just you see something downfield, someone improvises, go ahead and give him a shot, or whether it's in the pocket, you see a 50-50 ball, you can maybe take down the sideline. I would like to see him build off of the stability he's had and add a little bit of explosion to it.
I do kind of feel like they will, because I don't know how much of this is Hackett and how much of this is, Zach, but they've been throwing a lot of checkdowns, a lot of screens. That's just preseason. But considering this Corey Davis interview and trying to see, what can Brownlee do? What can Taylor do? Charles, all those guys. I wonder if they do air it out a little bit more when Zach is in. I think when Rodgers is in, starting O-line minus Dwayne Brown, I think it's going to be a lot of running, quick passes, get the ball in his hands, just whatever. But when Zach is in, I kind of feel like air it out a little bit. Like you said, give these receivers a chance to make some plays and give Zach a chance to make some plays.
And
so
that too, to evaluate the receivers, give them some shots.
Yeah. All right. That's it for us. Follow us at TYJ Pod on Twitter. Michael _Nania. Myself, Ben W. Blessington. Go to jetsxfactor.com. Best place to go for Jets content. Go to the Jets YouTube, Jets X Factor YouTube as well. We post all our podcasts there. Some point we'll get back to using video. I know we see comments every time. They're like, "Where the hell is the video?" We're lazy.
They don't want to see us. Trust me.
People know what you look like. They say you were looking pretty buff in that photo with Quinnen. I gotta say, was it just the angle? Why did you not look that much smaller than Quinnen? Because I've seen you. I know you. Quinnen's got to be massive.
I'm not that much smaller than Quinnen.
No, that's a lot.
We're about the same size.
That photo, you kind of look similar. I was like, what the hell? I guess
it's a good angle. It's just
you've been eating well and squatting. All right.
I think he still doubles me up, but
probably
we're getting there.
Most likely. What did I forget? iTunes, subscribe, rate, review. I don't know. I think that's it. Michael, anything else?
So we're going all white against the Giants, blue on white, probably.
Yes, probably. That is probably the
I think that's an awesome uni matchup.
Oh,
Remember
actually,
that was the debut of the uniforms.
Yeah,
in, 2019.
But they wore with the green socks, not the white socks. I do have one. I have one hot take. Maybe not that hot, but I was watching Hard Knocks last night, and we got to, or 2 nights ago, whatever, and we got to see the green on white under the lights against the Bucks. And I have to say, it looks pretty damn good. I think green and white in prime time at home. Good. So that Chargers game, that right now is a Sunday Night Football game, home game. They already have the 2 throwback unis and the 1 blackout game against the Dolphins. So they're going to have to wear one of their primary uniforms in that Chargers game. There's some thought maybe they go all white, Chargers powder blue. I'm saying no. I think you go green on white, wear it in a regular season game. It's like the classic Jets combo, and they really have barely worn it. I'd like to see it one time before they retire these uniforms. And you saw that post when they showed Woody Johnson's chain, and it's in his office. I quote tweeted it or tweeted it out or something. But it's in Woody's office, and behind Woody is an oval, updated oval with the 80s logo in it. It's their midfield logo for the 2 throwback games. I guarantee you that's their new logo after this year. Why else would Woody Johnson have that hung in his? Like, it's permanent fixture.
That's pretty excessive for an alternate logo.
Yeah, and then people
right?
were. I was
like, you wouldn't do that for just a side logo.
No, and I can't. And we've been seeing. I mean, they gave Dalvin Cook the '80s logo. All the coaches have
Everyone's
the 80s logo
got
on.
it. Like every hat is that.
Woody, when he brought out his chain, is wearing the '80s logo. So clearly, he's bought into the '80s logo. It's definitely coming. I think it makes sense to, if you want it to be more of a logo, you put it in the oval. Still on the helmet, still just the '80s, but. They didn't even have scoreboards and stuff back in the 80s, so it's hard for a word to just be a logo. So put it in the oval, keep the kind of the traditional Namath, but you put the beloved 80s logo in there. I don't know. Food for thought. I think that's the new logo. Anyways, let's get out of here. We'll be back recording Saturday night, so probably Sunday morning, right, Michael? That sound good? Or we?
Yeah, probably, but I guess you never know.
Until Sunday morning. Yeah, all right. It'll come out sometime Sunday.
Maybe.
Thank you everybody for listening. Have a great week. Go Jets.